So we were just talking there about Iran, the situation and the escalating tensions in the Middle East. Yes. Do you think that we're safer now that Qasem Soleimani is dead?
Look, I don't shed any tears for Soleimani. I fully understand his pattern of behaviour. He was essentially in charge of the defence forces for Iran. Their behaviour across the region has been one that has been destabilising. He has the blood of many people on his hands. His pattern of behaviour has been such that has been unacceptable and contrary to international law for a long time. However, to take him out at this stage, when there has been escalating tensions, seems to me to not be making the world safer. Actually, we are taking a major lurch towards war. And we're doing that because the president is reckless and hasn't thought through, I don't think, what it is that he's doing. But it seems to me quite clear that the Iranians are going to counterattack, and it means that our interests, our people, our forces are of course under threat. You know, there will be more attacks on the tankers. We have relatively lightly armed members of the armed forces in Iraq, for example. You know, they are clearly vulnerable. We have civilians there. We have embassies in the region. Yes, of course, everyone is now vulnerable. And he didn't even tell us before he agreed for this man to be killed in Baghdad. I mean, that's the other point, is that they breached Iraqi sovereignty in order to kill the head of the defence forces for Iran. And so how are the Iraqis supposed to respond to that? You know, there will be great pressure on the Iraqis to say to the Americans and to the British and to the other Western allies that have been trying to help them fight ISIS that they should leave. And so I think that it makes the whole area much more unstable and much more dangerous.
Do you think we could be heading towards a war?
Yes. And I think the point is this, is that what we should be saying quite clearly now is we will not be involved in this. You know, this is not, first of all, Donald Trump should not be doing this. There has been a pattern of behaviour from Donald Trump ever since the time he was a candidate. He said he was going to rip up the Iranian nuclear deal. Now, the Iranian nuclear deal, people will remember, was not a perfect agreement, but it was a way of bringing Iran in from the cold. It was beginning to talk to them, and it was essentially saying to them, we will stop the sanctions if you stop your development of a nuclear bomb. It was bringing them in from the cold, and it was also, Iran is a very divided country. There is a so-called moderates in Iranian terms, you know, led by people like Rouhani, who are the ones who really stuck their neck out in order to be able to be involved with the West. And then there are the hardline theocrats, those that are responsible for holding Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. This general was part of that mob, you know, and they are now in the ascendancy because the more moderate forces in Iran have been undermined by the fact that the Iranian nuclear deal has been torn up by Donald Trump.
What can the UK government actually do? Because, as you say, we weren't told by Donald Trump, were we? So we don't have that clearly the influence that perhaps we would like to have over Donald Trump.
Yeah.
We clearly don't want to take the side of the Iranians for the reasons that you have outlined. What can we do?
So, first of all, I think that what we're doing now is too little and too late. You know, I not only warned Dominic Raab, I warned Jeremy Hunt, and I warned his predecessor. You know, and I said, I remember saying, right, to Boris Johnson, I am really worried that the president is going to rip up the Iranian nuclear deal. And he said to me, you should spend a bit less time reading the newspapers. I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, we have been complacent.
When did you say that to him?
In Foreign Office questions. In Foreign Office questions, I raised with him my concerns about where the Americans were going and what was going to happen. And one of the reasons I did was because the Chief of Staff of Colin Powell, and Colin Powell, people will remember, was the general responsible for the Iraq war. His Chief of Staff said, we are going down the same path as we did before the Iraq war. But a war with Iran will be 10 to 15 times worse in terms of loss of life and the costs. And he said, we have to stop. It was wrong for us to go to war in Iraq. It'll be even worse if we go to war with Iran. And I have been warning about this. And, you know, we now find ourselves in this situation. And the question now for Britain is, do we stand firm and say to the Americans, this is the wrong thing to do. We do not drag us into a war. We refuse to be involved in a war. And I believe that when I say that, I speak on behalf of the majority of the British people who know that the last 4 wars in the Middle East we have gone into with the idea of, oh, this is a bad man, let's take him out, without any plan as to what the consequences would be or what it is that we want to achieve.
To be fair to the government, they are using the word, as we heard from Dominic Raab there, de-escalation again and again. I mean, this doesn't sound like someone who's about to go to war with Iran. But secondly, my point is, you're talking there about the warnings about the US behaviour.
Yes.
The way to stop that is to have influence over the US. And I do just wonder, I mean, just to pick one quote that you said previously about President Trump, you said he's a sexual predator, he is a racist, and it's right to say that. I mean, do you really think that this famously thin-skinned man would heed your warnings if you've spoken about him like that in public?
Well, I tell you what, I mean, my experience of bullies is that you stand up to them. I mean, Theresa May held his hand and held his hand. Boris Johnson does a Donald Trump kind of impersonation most of the time. This is not the way to influence him. The way to influence him is to stand up to him and say you're wrong. And I'll tell you the other way in which we could influence him, and that is to use our place in the Security Council. We're on the most important body for the United Nations, and yet what's happening? We're not supposed to be just there to be decorative. Why aren't we saying that there should be an emergency meeting of the Security Council in order to bring the world together and to say this must stop? The illegal activity, both of America and Iran, must stop, and the world has to come together at this point. And the British Parliament and the British people have to speak with one voice and say, we will not be involved in this war. We need to behave in the same way as Harold Wilson did when it came to Vietnam and actually say no to the Americans.
Do people really care?
Oh,
if we get involved or not? I mean, this is a war between superpowers.
No. Listen, the reason that we care is because we will be putting our brave British troops on the line. I think about them and I think about their families. I think about the loss of life. I think about the dual nationals. I think about Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and all the other dual nationals who are languishing in jail wrongly, and how they will be vulnerable. I think about the whole region. I think about 83 million Iranian people, who are innocent, who will become victims of a war like this. Of course we should care. We should take responsibility. We are international players. Of course, we have other preoccupations, and clearly the Prime Minister has a lot of preoccupations. He's sunning himself, drinking vodka martinis, somewhere else, and not paying attention to this. It is important that we do it. We've had 3 Cobra meetings where Mark Sedwell, the chief civil servant, has had to chair it because the Prime Minister hasn't been available.
Are there any such situation where you could support military intervention?
Of course. If we are at risk of imminent attack, then of course we always defend ourselves. Of course we do. But the lessons...
The US is saying that they have intelligence about attacks.
They say... So they say that... Well, first of all, my problem is that Boris Johnson... Donald Trump has a kind of a loose relationship with the truth. So I'm not going to take his word for it on the basis of a tweet that he says that they were at fear of attack. We would want to see, frankly, if we had a proper relationship with the United States, they would contact us in advance and they would say, we are at risk of imminent attack. This is the imminent attack. We've always shared security information with the United States, so they should have told us about it. They should have told us what the imminent attack was. Or are we actually talking about, them justifying themselves afterwards? I mean, Donald Trump is now saying that he was doing this in order to stop a war, not to start one. Well, how does that work? He's just sent 3,000 additional troops into the region. We have 2 naval vessels now, redeployed in the area. It doesn't look like we're walking away from a war. It looks like we're about to walk into one. OK. Now,
I'm keen to talk to you about, as well, your pitch for the Labour leadership. You've thrown your hat into the race. You want to take the top job in Labour, taking over from Jeremy Corbyn. Do you think he was a good leader?
Well, can I just first say, I mean, to be honest with you, for the last sort of 24 hours, I haven't necessarily been that preoccupied with the leadership. Obviously, the fact that we may be about to go to war has been my major preoccupation over the last day or so. And I think that's only right, because I am concerned that the British government are not doing enough. They are not taking this seriously, and they are ducking this issue, and they must not. We can play and we must play a pivotal role in this. So that's what I've been doing more than anything else.
But looking forward?
OK, so looking forward. I think that actually, in a kind of odd way, I mean, anybody who becomes leader of the Labour Party will need to be able to deal with issues such as this, issues such as the fires in Australia. I mean, these sorts of things are what are going to frame the world, it seems to me.
So do you think Jeremy
years.
Corbyn was a good leader then?
I think that Jeremy had many talents and I think the reason he was popular in the Labour Party was because he spoke from the heart. When he was first elected, he had an authenticity about him that people found really attractive. And he moved us away from all this triangulation. I think that also he was very important in terms of winning the argument within the Labour Party about us simply going down the road of austerity all the time. So I think that there were many things.
Do you think you won the argument in the country as well as the Labour Party?
Well, he clearly didn't win the argument in the country. We didn't win the general election. I think that the Conservatives have moved towards us and have accepted that austerity has to end. Whether they've actually going to do that or not, of course, is another matter. But, you know, at least they pay lip service to our argument that we have to stop austerity because the people who are suffering are those at the bottom of the pile. So, you know, there were achievements, but the most important achievement for any Labour leader is to win elections. We were established by working people to look after them in government. And if we can't win elections, then we are failing as a party and the leadership is failing too.
And you certainly didn't win the election. It was like you got the fewest number of seats since the 1930s.
Yeah,
why do you think you had such a catastrophic result?
I think there were a number of factors. I think that there are all kinds of criticisms in terms of the way in which the election was organised. I think that it was done very badly. I think that we weren't sufficiently clear about what our priorities were. I think that there's nobody, if anybody looks at the manifesto, they can't say, well, I don't like this or I don't like that, but there was too much in it. We didn't have...
People didn't trust it.
Well, it just wasn't convincing because there was too much in it. And in the end, you know, we can say until we're blue in the face that there is another way, and there is, but we won't get the opportunity to serve if people don't believe us and they don't believe in us. And if we're not competent and if we're not trustworthy, then they won't give us the chance to do it. So what we need to do, in my view, is not have some sort of existential crisis about who it is that we are. We know who we are. The country, in a way, knows who we are. But we need to be clear about what our plan is, where we're going, and in order to, we have to be able to convince people that we have certain priorities and those priorities are theirs. We need to make sure that we listen to the country and we listen to what their problems are and we put forward solutions in a way which is meaningful and they can believe in us.
One of the other big issues, of course, from the election was Brexit. I just want to have a look at something that Caroline Flint said on this show before Christmas, something you've come back against very strongly. Caroline Flint, former Labour MP, lost her seat in Don Valley, said this: "I don't believe anybody who has been the architects of our European policy in the last few years is credible to be leader." And then she went on to say, "Keir Starmer led us down the path of a second referendum, and I'm afraid Emily Thornberry did as well. She said to one of my colleagues, 'I'm glad my constituents aren't as stupid as yours.'" Now, you've come back saying that's not true. You're pursuing legal action.
Well, I can't... I mean, it's in the hands of my lawyers. I mean, I've issued a letter before action and, you know, I need... Along with everything else I need to do next week, I need to see my solicitors and we need to issue a writ. So,
how about the...
I mean, there's a, you know, you can't just make up rubbish about me and not expect me to take legal action. I mean, people can slag me off and they do. But so long as they do it on the basis of truth, I'll take it on the chin. But if they start making things up, I have to take legal action. And I have done, I'm afraid, on 3 or 4 previous occasions when newspapers have said things about me that aren't true and when my political opponents have said things about me that aren't true. And it looks like I may have to do it again.
How about the...
Even though she's a Labour MP, which is, you know, I deeply regret that we're going to need to do this. But if we have to do it, we have to do it.
How about the wider point that people like yourselves and Keir Starmer should not lead the Labour Party because you backed a second referendum?
Well, I think that we shouldn't have had a general election on a single issue. I think that what we did, that we gave Boris Johnson power by allowing him to wrap himself up in the lie that he could get Brexit done by the end of January, because it won't be done. We will need to continue to negotiate a relationship with Europe, and obviously we will be leaving at the end of January, but you know, getting Brexit done will also mean negotiating an ongoing relationship, because 50% of our trade is with Europe, and frankly there's another 40 trade agreements with the rest of the world that simply come from us being part of the European Union, and we're going to have to negotiate all of those as well. And he says that he can do it by the end of the year. Obviously this is an ongoing issue that we're going to need to deal with. My point is this. Because we agreed to a general election and because it was going to be a Brexit election, I think that was a mistake. I think that if we wanted to deal with a single issue, we should have said, let's deal with that single issue by having a referendum. A general election is not a referendum, and we thought that we could change the subject.
Do you still want to remain now, after the election?
Oh, I think that it's in Britain's interest to remain in the European Union, but we're leaving. So what do? I mean, I'm a practical, pragmatic politician. We're leaving at the end of January.
Okay.
So what's important now is that we ensure that we have a relationship with Europe that's going to work for jobs and the economy.
Just want to quickly show you a YouGov poll that was done this week on Labour members and who they want to see as the next Labour leader. You can see here, this is the percentage of first preferences. So Keir Starmer way out in the head, 31%, Rebecca Bailey, 20%. 6%. Have you got a chance?
Well, I remember looking back at the other two leadership elections, and Andy Burnham was absolutely going to win the last one, and David Miliband was absolutely going to win the one before. I mean, it hasn't even started yet. So we've got a busy week in front of us. We will see what the rules are. The campaigns will be launched. We'll have some hustings. We're going to go around the country, and let's see what people actually think. Because, you know, as I say, the campaign hasn't even started yet. Just
finally, just looking at some of these faces here, it's more women than men, and actually more women potentially entering the contest as well. You've previously said that it's embarrassing that the Labour Party's never had a female leader. Would it be embarrassing if, in a contest where more female candidates are standing than male, that Labour ends up with another male leader? Look, let's make sure that we get the best candidate. I mean, obviously that's got to be the most important thing, and it'll be for the members to decide. But I think that the best candidate happens to be a woman. But let's see what they say. OK, thank you very much for coming on the programme today. Thank you.